The shy girl came every day to read aloud to a man who couldn't hear her. He lay in a coma, motionless, a stranger in a quiet hospital bed. She didn't know he was young or rich, or that he'd once had the whole world in his hands and let it slip through his fingers. All she knew was that reading to him made the silence feel less lonely. When he finally woke, blinking into the pale hospital light, he remembered nothing except her voice. Because some stories don't begin with a glance. They begin with a whisper. And sometimes the quietest place is where love first finds its voice. It all began in room 406, where the world seemed hushed, but everything that mattered was being heard. He woke after 2 years in a coma, and the only thing he remembered was her voice. He didn't know her name, had never seen her face, but every story she'd read, every gentle hello she whispered as she sat beside his bed, had been like a red thread pulling him back from the darkest place. She, Lila, had no idea the man she read to each afternoon, the man everyone said would never wake, was a young millionaire who had walked away from everything and nearly let go of life itself. And so their story began, not in a place anyone would expect love to take root, but in a quiet hospital room at the end of a white hallway where time seemed to hold its breath, room 406. The day Lila was assigned to room 406, it was raining. A late autumn drizzle, just enough to dampen the hem of the button-down shirt she wore beneath her wrinkled white coat. No one gave her much instruction. Just, take care of that patient. No family, he won't wake up. Unlike the other rooms, this one didn't reek of antiseptic. It smelled of clean linen, faint metal, and the slow, steady hum of machines, like the lull of a dream that never ended. The man in the bed looked young, not yet 30. Gaunt face, high-bridged nose, dark hair grown long and uneven. His pillow had shifted to one side. No one had straightened it in ages. Lila stood there a moment without knowing why. She just felt calm. No moans, no worried relatives hovering with questions. Only silence. And somehow she liked that. She set her bag down and pulled out a book, The Little Prince, always tucked inside out of habit. No one had told her to read to him, but she sat in the chair beside his bed and began. Hello. My name is Lila. I'm a nursing intern. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm going to read to you. The book opened like a quiet door, and her voice slipped through, into her own hidden world and maybe into his. Day after day, she returned to room 406, checked the monitors, changed the sheets, warmed his hands with a soft cloth. Then she'd sit, open her book, and read. Her voice never loud, just enough to fill the space between them. Sometimes she talked about herself, silly things, forgettable. Things, like getting on the wrong bus or missing her mother's soup. One afternoon, she even read aloud a letter she'd written to someone she once loved but never sent. She laughed to herself then, imagining how crazy she must look, but in that room, beside that man, she didn't have to pretend to be strong. She knew nothing about him, just a name on a file, Mr. A. Vale. No visitors, no updates. Maybe that's why she let herself be open. No one was listening, so she could finally be herself. Then, one afternoon, as she read, "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly," the heart monitor jumped. A curve on the screen, sharp and clear, not a glitch. She stopped, went still, looked at him, then reached for his hand, still cold, but did it twitch? "Can you hear me?" she asked softly, then smiled to herself. I'm probably imagining it, but after that day she didn't doubt anymore. Even when the doctors waved it off, just a reflex. Lila believed something had shifted, that her voice, small and unnoticed by the world, had found its way into his mind. Outside room. 406, life pulsed on. Cars, calls, hurried love confessions on glowing screens. But inside, a quieter world stirred. Slow, gentle, like something blooming in the dark. Lila began researching music therapy, language patterns, rare awakenings. She kept notes, tracked every flicker of his eyelids, every breath that seemed a little deeper than the one before. "Don't get your hopes up," a colleague warned. "It'll hurt too much." But Lila only smiled, Sometimes she felt like she too had been asleep, and this quiet man in this quiet room was the one gently waking her. One afternoon, golden sunlight spilled through the window and pooled across the floor. She leaned in and whispered, "It's a beautiful day. Maybe today's the day you'll open your eyes." And if anyone had been listening, really listening, they would have known. She wasn't speaking to silence anymore. Because some connections don't begin with a glance. Sometimes all it takes is a voice, soft and steady, returning day after day, gentle enough to call someone home from the dark. Not everyone believes in what the eyes can't see. But ever since the heart monitor began flashing in irregular patterns, Lila hadn't been able to stop thinking about the man in the hospital bed and what might be stirring inside him. She'd been reading to him for nearly a month. At first it was The Little Prince, then pages of her own writing, pieces of a journal no one had ever seen. Each afternoon after her shift, she gave herself 30 quiet minutes in room 406, a place where time moved like a still river. The only thing that had changed was her. That day, she came earlier than usual. The morning rain had passed, leaving behind damp air and the scent of earth. Something in her chest felt unsettled, not because of her shift, but because of that erratic heartbeat she'd promised herself not to think about anymore. And yet, she did. She slipped into the records room after lunch, quiet as someone doing something wrong. The fan rattled in the corner, and the air smelled of damp paper and old ink. She wasn't allowed to open patient files, but she told herself, "It's just a name. No harm in that. His name. Aidan Vale." She stopped when she saw the photo, clipped to the folder. A young face, eyes slightly sorrowful. Not the look of a man in pain, but of someone who had stared too long into something empty. She skimmed. Entrepreneur, founder of Ether Code. Traffic accident, comatose since, no immediate family. No family. Lila frowned. How could someone so young, so accomplished, living in a city full of people, have no one? No friends, no partner, no one calling his name. His name still appeared in old headlines. The reclusive young billionaire, the genius who built a tech empire in a garage. And then, the accident. Just one line. Aidan Vale in coma. No statement from family. She looked at his picture again. She had sat beside this man for weeks, reading to him like he was no one. Now she knew his name, his age, and the shape of a loneliness no one had bothered to name. She carried that weight back to room 406. That day she didn't open a book. She simply sat there looking at him. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for reading you silly things, like we were friends. But maybe you needed something small and ordinary." She told him what she had learned, not to invade, but as someone trying to understand the life still flickering, faint and fragile before her. "Ether Code," she said softly. "It's a beautiful name. You built a world for people to connect, and now I'm trying to reach you with a book." She laughed under her breath. "It sounds ridiculous." But from that day on she called him by his name. Aidan. No longer just the patient or the unresponsive man. She left a small card by his bed, written in violet ink. "Hello, Aidan. It rained again today." Another nurse saw it the next morning and raised an eyebrow, half smiling. "What are you doing, Lila?" "I just thought, if he ever wakes up, someone should have said hello," she replied. The other nurse shook her head. "Don't be so dreamy. No one wakes up after 2 years." Lila didn't argue. She simply kept coming back. Week later, something shifted. She was reading aloud from an essay she'd found the night before, on language, memory, and the brain's strange, stubborn will to return. Her voice was slow, deliberate. When she reached the line, "Familiar sound may be the key to unlocking the unconscious mind," the screen flickered. One spike, clear and higher than the rest. She looked at him. "Aidan, you heard me, didn't you?" She didn't wait for a sign. She leaned in close and whispered something she had never told anyone. "I used to feel like I was asleep too, until I started coming here." That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his image drifting through her mind, like someone she'd known for years. She couldn't say when she stopped seeing him as a patient. Maybe it was when she read his name, or when she began reading without expecting an answer. Sometimes what bonds us to another person isn't shared memory, but the silence they leave behind. And if someone out there is listening to this story, maybe they've known someone like that too. Someone who didn't speak, but stayed. Someone who made them believe that just one voice, one small hello, could be enough to keep from getting lost in a world that never stops shouting. If you've ever reached for someone without needing them to reach back, then maybe you'll understand why Lila kept reading, even though no one ever answered. Lila began to doubt, not because Aiden had changed, he hadn't. He still lay perfectly still. But the world around her had shifted. A few days after she'd seen the spike in his heart monitor while reading the line, "Familiar voices can awaken consciousness," she noticed the whispers. A few nurses from her shift murmured behind her back, and though she couldn't catch their words, the sideways glances at the card she'd left by his bed, the one that said, "Hello, Aiden," written in violet ink, spoke loud enough, romanticizing a coma patient. Thinks she's living in a novel. She even reads him poetry. No one said it to her face, but cruelty always cuts deeper when it's wrapped in laughter. That day when she left room 406, she didn't glance back like she usually did. She walked straight down the hall, hands clenched, heart sinking under a weight she didn't quite know how to name. Not shame, not exactly hurt. Just the aching sense of having lost something safe, a place where she could simply be without judgment. That night, she couldn't sleep. She reached for an old journal, the one she'd started during her first year in nursing school. The handwriting was uneven, urgent. "First time in ICU today, ICU." Didn't dare breathe. Patients looked like they were floating. I want to do something that keeps them from drifting away. She had believed once that nursing was more than blood pressure and charts, that it meant being present beside another human being, even if they couldn't be present in return. That was what she had held on to. And now it was slipping from her hands. The next day, she still went to work. Still took temperatures, scribbled notes, made her rounds like another cog in the great clinical machine. But when she stopped in front of room 406, she hesitated. Her hand rested on the door handle. She didn't open it, just stared at the nameplate Aiden Vale, and wondered, was she fooling herself? She turned away. For the first time in weeks, room 406 heard no voice, no soft hello, no Lila. One day. Then two. Then three. On the third night, in her small dorm room, rain began to fall outside the window. She wondered, had anyone opened the blinds in room 406? Did anyone know that the man lying there had once built ether code, had once stood on the covers of magazines, had once burned brightly before disappearing? She picked up her journal again. This time she copied down a poem. Some people remain in your heart for a long, long time, not because they ever spoke, but because they listened long enough. Below it she wrote, "If it doesn't rain tomorrow, I'll go back." The next morning, the sun came out. Light slanted through the window of room 406, golden and soft. And for the first time in days, Lila returned, not with a book, but with a letter, folded in quarters, written carefully by hand, like something meant for an old friend she'd never actually met. She stepped inside. The room hadn't changed. The machines still hummed their quiet lullaby. Aiden lay as he always had, like a memory paused mid-breath. She pulled up the chair, didn't read, just sat. Then gently placed the letter into his hand, the one she once thought had moved beneath her touch. "I'm sorry I left," she whispered. "I thought I heard something, but maybe I imagined it." She stood, reached out to the edge of his bed, was about to turn away when she heard a sound. Faint. The monitor blinked. Not erratic, but not quite steady either. She froze, heart fluttering between hope and doubt. That night, she didn't write in her journal. Instead, she placed a book on the table ready for tomorrow, because if he truly could hear her, then tomorrow she would go on. She would tell him about the time she got lost in a grocery store as a child and a stranger walked her back. She'd tell Him about the yellow umbrella her mother kept long after it tore. She would tell him that sometimes we don't need people to say much, only to stay. She didn't know what exactly was waking up in the man lying silently before her. But maybe, somewhere between consciousness and sleep, there was a place where the sound of one voice, steady, patient, kind, could still be heard. The next day there was no rain, no sun, just a dull, milky light, like a film of dust had settled over everything, including Lila's thoughts. She returned to room 406 for the first time in days, carrying an old book and a letter she wasn't sure she would read. She told herself she was ready to continue, but something had changed. Not Aiden, he remained as he was, but her. A version of herself had begun to emerge from beneath the weight of her own doubt. She pulled the chair close, gently touched his hand, a quiet hello. A breeze drifted in through the cracked window, lifting the corner of the card she'd once written. "Hello, Aiden. Still there, untouched. Do you still remember me?" she murmured, smiling faintly, then picked up where she'd left off. She didn't know that change was waiting just outside that door. Later, while filing patient records, the hospital secretary called her over. From a tray of mail, she pulled out a brown envelope, marked in bold, "Private, hand delivery." "It's from a relative of Mr. Vale," the secretary said. "A lawyer dropped it off. They asked us to pass it to you." "A lawyer?" Lila blinked, confused. "His grandmother passed away last week," the woman added gently. "She knew about you." Lila stood there for a moment. She didn't ask anything more, so just walked back to the dorms, the envelope clenched in her hand like something that might vanish if she let go. Under the soft yellow light of her small room, she opened it. Inside was a single printed page and a handwritten letter. The printed sheet was part of a will, a short clause that read, "With deep gratitude, I leave a symbolic gift and my thanks to the girl with the gentle voice who never left my grandson, Aiden, during his quietest days." Below it, the shaky signature of Beatrice Vale. Lila didn't cry. She wasn't even surprised. She just sat still. Her hands trembled slightly. Then she unfolded the second letter, written in Beatrice's hand. "Dear girl, I don't know your name, but I've heard of you. The notes you leave behind, the ink scrawls in the margins, the quiet hellos. Each evening, perhaps others think you're naive, but I don't. I've lived long enough to know. Some people talk endlessly and leave nothing behind, and some, with only a whisper, bring someone back to life. Thank you for reading. Even if Aiden couldn't respond, you became the one thing that helped me believe he hadn't completely left this world. When I'm gone, I ask only this, that you keep reading, because perhaps it's the only thing he can still hear." Beatrice Vale Lila folded the letter and held it against her chest. She didn't know how long she sat there. Outside, a soft rain began to fall, the kind that tapped gently on windows like someone knocking at memory's door. That night, she returned to room 406 once more. This time, the letter wasn't something to tuck away. It was something to read aloud. "It's from your grandmother," she whispered. "She mentioned me. I think she believed I was doing something right." She opened the letter, reading each line slowly, clearly. No additions, no edits. Her voice was low and warm, as if speaking to someone who could meet her eyes. And when she read the words, "You became the one thing that helped me believe Aiden hadn't completely left this world," the monitor jumped. A longer beat, steadier, clearer. Lila paused. She didn't look at the screen, didn't rush to confirm. She simply held his hand a little tighter. "I'm still here," she said, "even if you can't answer yet." The next morning in her journal, she wrote only one line. Sometimes the letters never read aloud are the ones that keep someone alive. She didn't know why she came in earlier than usual that morning. The sky hadn't fully lightened. Dew clung to the edges of the window, fogging the glass with the breath of a cold night. Lila walked the quiet hospital hallway like someone still dreaming, everything too still, too hushed. Even the sound of her shoes echoed like a heartbeat. Room 406 was the same. The door half closed, the light inside soft and pale, as if time had forgotten how to move. But something was different. She pushed the door open and froze. The man she had read to for months, sent dozens of greetings to, written letter after letter for, was awake. His eyes were open. Not wide, not focused, but undeniably open, and he was looking at her, not around the room, not into nothingness. At her. His eyes were a deep, quiet brown, lit with something that shimmered like life, but still too fragile to be called clarity. Lila stood still, her heart pounding so hard it felt like she was the one waking from a long sleep. "Aiden?" she whispered, saying his name out loud for the first time with a trembling voice. His eyelids moved slowly like he was trying to answer. His lips were dry, and the sound that escaped them wasn't a word, but his gaze wasn't vague. It held her, as if he'd known her all along. She called for help. After that, everything moved in a blur. Doctors rushing in, machines reattached, nurses crisscrossing the room, voices she couldn't follow, all background noise to one simple, staggering truth. He was awake, and he had looked at her. 2 days later, he was fully conscious. News spread through the hospital like a miracle in midwinter. A coma patient, asleep for 2 years, awake, intact, no severe brain damage, no memory loss. Except for one thing, he remembered nothing of his life. Not the accident, not the company, not his childhood, his friends, his family. Only a voice, and when the doctor asked if he recognized anyone, Aiden answered in a whisper, raw but certain. There was a voice. A girl's voice, and she read to me. "Do you know who she is?" as the doctor asked. He shook his head, but his eyes searched the room, waiting. That voice, it's what I held on to, so I wouldn't drift away. Lila heard about it from a colleague. She didn't know what to feel, joy or a strange, quiet fear. That when he saw her, her real face, not just her voice, he'd be disappointed. A voice could be lovely, but the person behind it, not always. But it was Aiden who asked to meet the girl with the familiar voice. They arranged a private visit. The room was brighter now, tidier, as if holding its breath for something to begin. Lila stepped inside. Aiden was sitting up, propped gently against a pillow. His eyes still looked tired but brighter when she said, "Hello?" Softly. Unmistakably herself, he stilled. His eyes widened, his breath deepened, and for the first time in 2 years he smiled. "It's you," he said. "I know your voice." Lila sat down, smiling through a blur of emotion. Relief, nervousness, wonder. "You really remember me?" she asked. "Not your face," Aiden replied. "Just your voice. You kept me here, and day after day." They didn't say much else that day. Just fragments of memory Aiden offered. No clear images, only sensations, familiar sounds, phrases that felt like home, the feeling of being heard, of being waited for, and at the center of it all, her voice. When Lila left the room, her heart held something too new to name, but for the first time she didn't feel like someone reading into a void. She was the voice someone remembered, the voice that had kept someone alive. Aiden didn't remember her name, but that voice, he could never mistake it. Waking up had felt like wandering into a familiar city with no map. Streets he might have known, but no sense of where home was. In that darkness, in the long hush of unbeing, he'd held on to a sound. A woman's voice, soft and steady, unhurried. Never asking for anything in return. And now in a hospital full of voices, hundreds every day, he wanted to find hers, the one that had read to him for 2 years while he lay asleep. Doctors told him not to worry about that yet. Rest. They said, relearn how to walk, try to recover your memories, but he couldn't wait. She wasn't a memory. She was the only real thing that had survived the blur. Whenever he tried to remember, only one thing came back: her voice. Lines of text, whispered as though meant just for him. No images, no color, only sound. In those first days, Aiden asked everyone, nurses, assistants, even interns. He didn't have much to describe. only that the voice was gentle, a little shy but honest. No one claimed it. A few tried reading a passage aloud, but he shook his head each time. Wrong. Not the tone, but the breath between words. It was missing. One nurse laughed. Maybe she was just a dream. Aidan didn't smile. Maybe dreams are all I have left. Lila, meanwhile, was hiding. At some point, she began switching. Shifts, requesting a different ward. If she passed by his room, she turned away. In her mind, the image of Aidan waking, seeing her, and not recognizing her, or worse, being disappointed, was enough to keep her out. Voices can be, lovely, she thought, but I'm not what he's imagined. She wasn't memorable. She was quiet, ordinary. One face among many in a white coat. If Aidan was looking for a dream, she didn't want to be the reality that undid it. One afternoon, Aidan made his way down the hallway, leaning on crutches, his hands still unsteady. He stood near the elevator where nurses changed shifts, just listening. Voices washed past him like waves, but none stayed until he heard a simple question float in from a distance. "Anh van on chu? Are you doing okay?" Just that, but Aidan stopped cold. Something about it, familiar, unmistakably so. Not the words. The breath after the word van, a soft pause, a tender hesitation. He turned, catching a glimpse of someone disappearing down the corridor, hair tied low, his quick steps, then gone. That night he wrote a note and left it on the doctor's desk. "If someone read to me while I was in the coma, please tell her I haven't forgotten a single word." The next day, Lila received it. A nurse handed it to her casually. "I think it's meant for whoever was reading to him. Maybe that's you." Lila didn't reply. She folded the note, tucked it into the pocket of her coat, and went on with her shift. But that night, alone by her window, she took it. Out again. Read it once. Then again, "I haven't forgotten a single word." Not, "I remember you," not, "I want to see you," just, he had heard everything. Lila closed her eyes, clutching the paper to her chest. Maybe she didn't have to be perfect. Maybe just staying, that was enough to be remembered. The next day, when Aidan asked the doctor again, "Can I see her?" The doctor only smiled. Maybe she's just waiting for the right moment to speak. And if you've ever carried a voice inside you, one you heard but never named, one that stayed even when the world changed, you'll understand. Sometimes sound is the thinnest thread, but it's the one that holds us closest. She told no one. No one knew that Lila had kept the note he wrote like a rare kind of gift, one that didn't need a name to be precious. "I haven't forgotten a single word." It didn't say her name. It didn't even say it was for her. And still it reached something deep inside her, something she hadn't known was waiting. Lila no longer avoided him, but she didn't yet have the courage to stand in front of him as the voice. She returned to her routine quietly, as if trying to fit herself back into the old rhythm, though nothing, after all those days and silences, was quite the same. A week later, a doctor called her to the administrative office. "Aidan Vale would like to see you. He says you're the one he's been looking for." Lila swallowed. "But yeah, how does he know it? He heard you speaking the other day. That one line, 'Are you doing okay?' He said that's what told him." Her heart beat too fast. She nodded, said nothing more. Her hand gripped the edge of her coat, an old reflex like holding herself still when the ground might shift. The meeting room was tucked behind the rehab wing, a quiet space, free of machines, just two wooden chairs facing each other and a carafe of water between them. Lila stepped in first. She felt like a student called in for a parent-teacher meeting, so nervous her hands trembled. Then the door opened. Aidan walked in, no more crutches, just a careful pace. He wore a simple grey shirt, his hair freshly trimmed. When he saw her, he stopped, not from surprise or from recognition. "It's you," he said, and smiled. The first true smile she'd ever seen from him. "I knew it by the way you paused between two words." Lila gave a small laugh, eyes lowered. "I didn't think you'd remember." "I don't remember everything," he said, easing into the chair. "But your voice, it was the..." Only thing that kept me tethered. I was drifting through the dark, and your reading, that was the only light. They sat for a moment in silence. Not awkward. Just two people learning how to listen again. Not through monitors, not through memory, but with their full presence. Did you ever dream? Lila asked, her voice barely above a breath. Aidan nodded. It wasn't a world with shapes. I couldn't see anyone, couldn't feel anything clearly. But whenever I heard your voice, I knew I still existed. You were the line between me and forgetting. She bit her lip, eyes downcast. I was afraid that if you saw me, you'd be disappointed. Why? He asked gently. Because I'm not who you might have imagined. I'm just a student nurse. My voice shakes. My hands sweat. I'm not memorable. Aidan smiled again. I didn't imagine you. I heard you, and your voice saved me. There's nothing imaginary about something that real. Lila closed her eyes for a moment. For the first time in months, she let herself exhale completely. That day, when you opened your eyes, I was terrified, she whispered. I thought maybe the whole journey had only ever belonged to me. No, he said. It belonged to both of us. You read. I listened. We were together. Even if we never met. Another pause. Then Aidan asked softly, Do you still write? The letters you used to read to me? I still write, she said, though I thought no one was listening. Maybe now, he said, his eyes warmer than before. Maybe now I could listen while awake. Lila smiled. She reached into her bag and pulled out an old notebook. Worn edges, loosened spine. Just a short one, she said. Aidan nodded. I've waited a long time to hear more. Her voice rose again. Not flawless, not loud, but for Aidan it was the sound of warmth, of place, of homecoming. The sound that had once been a compass in the dark. In that small room there was no audience, just a girl who once read to no one, and a man who once lived in silence. And finally, they heard each other. If you've ever clung to a voice, one that made you feel held on your most lost days, you'll understand why Aidan called it light. And if you've ever been the one reading, never sure who might be listening, then maybe someone still remembers every word. A year later, the small room with 2 wooden chairs and a pitcher of water was just a memory. They didn't sit there anymore. Now Lila and Aidan stood together on a small stage, under soft lighting, beside a table draped in white cloth. Above them, printed in quiet, steady letters, The Book We Wrote Together by Aidan Vale and Lila Bennett. The room was silent, not out of formality, but emotion. The people gathered weren't just here to celebrate a book launch. They had come to witness something rare in a noisy world, a true story, a journey of healing that didn't require miracles, only patience and a voice. Aidan stepped to the podium. He looked composed, though a glimmer of nerves danced in his eyes. I used to have everything, he began. A company, wealth, recognition, and I lost it all in seconds. But the worst part wasn't losing my memory. It was losing the reason to wake up. He paused, looking toward Lila, sitting in the front row in a simple pale blue dress, her hands wrapped tightly around a cloth-bound notebook. Then I heard her, he said. I didn't know her name. I never saw her face. But her voice was the only thing that kept me from slipping away. The room stilled, no one checked their phone. No one moved. I couldn't remember streets or friends, but every word she read, I still carried them. For a long time I thought I was the only one who survived the dark, until I realized she'd been there with me. Every day, he turned slightly and reached out a hand. She's the true author of this book, and I just wrote it down. Lila walked up, not dazzling, not rehearsed, just with a small, shy smile and a single sentence that people would remember. I used to think I was reading into the void. But maybe someone was always listening. The book was a collection of the words she once read, snippets of writing, unsent letters, poems she thought no one would care to read. And now, it was the beginning of a new kind of story. Not a fairy tale romance, but a quiet companionship between 2 people who had once stood on either side of silence. After the launch, they walked home through a small park. the same one where he had relearned how to walk and where she had once read him the very first lines. They didn't talk much. Lila took Aidan's hand, her fingers curling around his, just like she had once held his grandmother's letter tight in her palm, months ago. "What did you think?" she asked softly, not looking at him. "When I read to you?" "I thought," Aidan said, "it was the voice of someone who never let go." They stopped by a bench. She sat first. He joined her. In her lap was the first printed copy of their book, the spine still rough, the pages uneven. He opened to the first page and pointed to the dedication, "To the girl who kept whispering until I found my way back." A breeze passed over them. The sky flushed gold, the color of late afternoon at the end of a long story. No climax, no fanfare, just presence. They had come full circle, from silence to response, from quiet to gratitude, from strangers to something gently, deeply familiar. And while the world outside raced to speak louder, two people had chosen to speak softly, just enough to hold each other, enough to write a book, enough to carry on. Thank you for walking this journey with us. If this story touched something in you, leave a quiet trace, a like, a comment, a whisper, so we'll know someone out there is still listening. This is the story of Aidan and Lila. But maybe it's your story too, if you've ever read or waited or been held in place by nothing more than a voice,